Hello, everyone. It's great to be together. My name is Jack Moxon. I'm a senior PM here on our core experiences team. And I'm going to be talking to you today a little bit about SemGrep Assistant. And in the session today, we want to cover four things. First, kind of give a little bit of background on our kind of philosophy around where AI fits into AppSec and how we've approached this. We're going to share what we learned after a year of public beta. We're going to do a deep dive demo on how our customers are using SemGrep Assistant today in their core workflows. And then we'll give a sneak peek at some of the future plans. We're very excited and bullish about what AI can do in the AppSec world. And so we'll share some of those things as we go. So starting though with a bit of background. So as everyone probably remembers, a year and a half ago or so, ChatGPT is launched, and there was this mad dash where everyone was putting AI into absolutely every application out there. And so the key question, I think, for us at SemGrep became, what's the appropriate role that AI should play in AppSec, given the kind of capabilities that are available today? And there's a lot of different paths we could have taken. We could have used AI to actually do secrets or SAST detection itself. And there's many different paths we looked at. There was a framework that we looked at when we thought about AI, and that's this one here, which is if you think about the ways that AI can be applied to different tasks, some of them are more low stakes and some of them are more high stakes. It's a very simple taxonomy here, but you can think of a low stakes application being something like doing some basic content marketing. Maybe it's not critical. For those kinds of applications of AI, you can actually kind of use automation with AI because it's fairly low stakes. Conversely, there are high stakes applications, an example being tax prep, where even if the AI is right 99% of the time, that 1% is going to be pretty painful. And so we think when those high stakes applications, AI is useful as an assistant. And we think AppSec, of course, is a relatively high stakes application for AI. Another way to think about this, I think, is AI is kind of a force multiplier. So we don't think AI is there to replace AppSec engineers. Not at all. In fact, it's there to assist humans in doing AppSec tasks. And we'll talk more about that in a second. So when we started SemGrep Assistant, we started asking a lot of our customers and users this simple question. We said, what would you do if you could just wave a magic wand and we could hire 2 more people on your AppSec team tomorrow? And almost universally, we got a lot of the same answers. They said things like, well, we would take the time to go beyond severity and confidence and understand the context behind all of the findings that we have. We would do a better job of evaluating true and false positives before sending them to developers. Once we have our list of true positives, we would spend more time prioritizing the most important things. We'd help our developers identify fixes and we'd share them so they can be committed. We would also, if we had more time, we would try to identify patterns and then use those patterns to create new custom rules or edit our existing rules to make them less noisy and more useful to our organization. And then, of course, like through all of this cycle, we would then update our rule policies, promote rules into different modes, like blocking rules versus rules that are just providing comments to our developers. And we would do all this. And so another way of saying this is, what if you had more time? And the way we think about AI in this context is we think that AI can be really helpful at a lot of these tasks. And when we do our demo, you're going to see that basically for each of these tasks, like understanding context, we have an AI-related feature. And as we'll go through in more detail, we have features across the board here. If I think about this as a loop, what's great about it is you're able to continuously improve your AppSec program by using AI. So by having more, hands, as it were, on your team, you can identify context better, you can prioritize fixes better, and you can help your developers actually get things fixed. A key part of our philosophy, though, is you'll notice our AI features don't really address the core SemGrep engine and the core SemGrep rules. And the reason for that is we think that vulnerability detection should be done by something deterministic like SemGrep. We don't, at least at this stage, think that it's a great idea necessarily to have AI generating findings. Where we think AI is super helpful is assisting AppSec and developers in their core workflows. And you'll see that in the demo that we do in just a minute. And then again, our core philosophy is that what AI should be doing is helping you make your AppSec program better over time by saving you time on the long tail of tasks that you have to do as an AppSec engineer. So that's kind of our background and our philosophy. Let's talk about what we've learned after a year in public beta and share some metrics and some customer stories. So quick numbers just to give you a sense of how many folks are using this right now. We have over 280 unique customers that are leveraging Semgrep Assistant right now. We're evaluating tens of thousands of findings, and every single week we're shipping about 500 or so AI auto fixes, and we'll talk about what that means in a second. One thing we're very proud of and pleasantly surprised to see is the agreement rate. So a lot of times I think people have asked questions about, how good are LLMs at assisting in some of these tasks? And in our app, we have an agree, disagree button that you can click. And 97% of the time, our users generally agree with our false positive and true positive analysis, which we think is really good. That can save you a ton of time by just giving you a first pass look at whether something is a true or false positive. We also find that when Semgrep Assistant marks something as true positive, like you can see here in this pull request comment, developers are twice as likely to fix that versus if it's not there. And then I think maybe one of the most interesting things, we track and look globally at our fix rates across all of our customers. Our customers that are receiving Semgrep Assistant evaluation on their findings have twice the fix rate as those that don't. And the way I think about this is like a very low hanging fruit to drive up your fix rate for your organization. Just by turning on Semgrep Assistant, you're essentially flipping a switch. It's a simple toggle that you can turn on, and you can dramatically drive up your fix rate today. And we'll talk about why that is in just a minute. We are proud to have a lot of customers that are using this, and they're getting a lot of value out of Semgrep Assistant today. Just want to highlight a couple things. So security engineer at Vanta was sharing that there are times when the fix suggestions from Semgrep Assistant just felt magical, and we've heard that across the board. Of course, it is an LLM. We're not saying it's perfect every single time, but it's pretty amazing when you have an issue, it comes up in the pull request, and there's a suggested fix that just feels magical and works. And so we're hearing that across the board. From one of our other customers, Thinkific, they were sharing that it helps them fix vulnerabilities quicker. And I think that's a key value prop for Semgrep Assistant. Again, having auto-fix suggestions in the developer workflow directly speed things up. And even when Semgrep Assistant cannot provide remediation guidance, just the additional context that developers are getting helps them get things fixed faster. So that's a bit of a preamble and some background. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the core workflows that our customers are using with Semgrep Assistant today and dive into how it's helping them. So one of the questions that we tend to ask, right, is what would you do if you could hire 2 more developers? Well, Semgrep Assistant and AI, I think, scales beyond just that question, right? So we've started to ask, well, what if you had 10 or even 100 more developers? What would you do? We've been asking those things to our customers. One of the first things everyone says is if we had more people on our team, we would do proactive code reviews and proactive fix suggestions for our customers. And this is why one of our flagship features for Semgrep Assistant is our AI-based remediation advice. So directly in GitHub and GitLab pull requests, developers will see fix suggestions directly in a pull request comment where it's available. And this is probably the core reason we see a much higher fix rate for teams that are using Semgrep Assistant. A really interesting kind of way of thinking about where LLMs are very strong is this example. So some of you may know Semgrep actually has a feature called AutoFix, which is a handwritten, human-created rule message that provides a fix suggestion to a developer. And I want to look at 3 little tiny code snippets to show how LLMs can be an improvement over that particular human-based feature. So here we have a simple example in section A here. The human autofix wants us to add a timeout to this request. And we've hard-coded that timeout to equal 5. And the AI-generated autofix would do the exact same thing in this particular case. Okay, let's find another example. So in example B, earlier in the file, there is a timeout that is set locally to 42. And let's compare the difference between the human written autofix and the AI generated autofix. So in the human case here, it's hard coded, right? So it's just going to say, let's set the timeout to 5. But where LLMs and AI are very powerful is they see there's a local convention in this file that sets a longer timeout for 42. And so instead of getting a hard coded number, you get an improvement here by using AI. And then here in example C, we have another example where we have a local variable that sets the timeout to 42. And again, human autofix is somewhat inflexible. And so what it's going to do is hard code that in. But again, AI is going to find that mistakenly unused local variable and set that here. So let's look at an example in a GitHub pull request here. And Bensei is going to talk through this one really quickly. Bensei?
Yeah, that's right. So this one, admittedly, not the smartest piece of code in the original commit. You had a developer just evaluate code, basically generate a string as the function body based on a passed-in user parameter, leading to an obvious vulnerability. What I like about this example is how Semgrep Assistant basically found like a very different method of accomplishing the same thing, wherein it would give you basically a function map where you can allow specific pieces of code, specific functions to be called with these variables. And the thing I like even more is after we generate the code, after we generate the suggested safer piece of code, which you see, highlighted in green in the suggested diff, we have a separate prompt that runs to sort of review the suggested fix and try to explain any additional considerations that engineers will see when attempting to apply that fix. So the text that you see underneath the suggested patch, so underneath all of that green code, is basically like a secondary chain's review of the suggested diff, wherein it can explain that technically this will not be the exact same code. You lose some capabilities because you cannot just like use any function name. You need to edit the function map yourself to add any function that you might be willing to allow your users to use. But basically, what I really like is, even though there is no clear fix in the case of like evaluating code that is dynamically generated from a request, there's no fix that gives you all the same functionality. Semgrep Assistant will, one, give you very equivalent pieces of code that can be a proper replacement, and then also explain how this reduces functionality in the name of security, where you no longer evaluate any code that users will request to run.
That's it. And what I think is also really nice about this is if you combine the power of Semgrep Assistant with Semgrep's customizable rules. Here's an example here where we actually, in the rule itself, we have an internal note in the rule message that says, hey, we have a convention here where we want to use this jsoup.clean function to sanitize input. In this example, you see that Semgrep Assistant is actually going to leverage that coaching that happened in the rule message and put it into the autofix suggestion. So you can actually kind of train Semgrep Assistant to adhere to your local conventions simply by customizing rules and customizing your rule messages, which we think is extremely powerful. The other thing that we love about these autofix suggestions, it really changes the narrative from, hey, AppSec maybe is a blocker, to AppSec is saying, hey, here's a vulnerability, but I've already got a fix prepared. Can you please review it? That really changes the narrative for the relationship between AppSec and developers. And again, this feature is why we think that customers using Semgrep Assistant are seeing such a higher fix rate across the board simply because of this feature. The other nice thing about this I would add is we have support for lots of different languages. So when I framed it as, hey, what would you do if you hired 2 more AppSec engineers? Everyone's going to have their strengths and weaknesses in terms of language support. One of the most powerful things about AI here is that it knows many more languages than your average AppSec engineer or human would know. Okay, so another thing that people say when we ask them, hey, what would you do if you had more time, essentially, is we would gather more context and we would be able to prioritize better. I was speaking to a customer yesterday about this, and they were saying, we've got 400 high severity findings, 50 of which are high confidence. I need help prioritizing there. And so what SemGrep Assistant can do is not just use severity and confidence, but it can also say, where is the code and what do we think the code is doing to make a stronger prioritization assessment. And so in this particular example, you can see we have areas of code that we think are high risk and those that are low risk. So user auth, payments, PII, these things are considered high risk. Things that are like test files maybe are considered low risk. And we can tag those automatically using SemGrep Assistant. If we look at a quick example here, here's an example in SemGrep where this is just a medium severity finding, but SemGrep Assistant is actually telling us directly in the app here that we think this is actually a low sensitivity finding. And the reason for that is it assessed and thinks that this is actually in a test file. So if we actually look at the file here, we do indeed see that it is in our PyTest directory, and so it is a test. So SemGrep Assistant can really help with prioritization in that way, just by tagging things with more context. A new feature that we're really excited about on top of this is the ability to turn those contextual recommendations into a priority inbox. And so some of you have probably already seen these. We're sending weekly emails now with the top 3 things that we think that, or I should say that SemGrep Assistant thinks that you should fix. We're also working on putting this into the dashboard. So you'll be able to see right here all of your top findings. And again, if you think about that loop of continuously improving your AppSec program, how nice is it to every single week just get like, hey, here are the 3 high priority things that we think that you should fix. We, of course, use things like severity and confidence to throw away low priority things right off the bat. We incorporate the sensitivity that we just covered there, things like rule message and any other metadata that we can find. Another thing that's great about this is that it works for SemGrep Code, SemGrep Supply Chain, and SemGrep Secrets. So it's cross-product, cross-platform, and allows you to have more easy prioritization of what are the most important things that my team should fix today. And again, all of these have a fix suggestion ready to go. So these are not just high priority findings. When you click into these, you're going to see a suggested fix. So it becomes much easier for you, again, to say to whoever's responsible for that fix, we already have a fix suggested here. Can you please review that? When we ask people, what would you do if you had more time? They said, I'd ask my new AppSec engineers to identify noisy rules and false positives. Again, we can help with this. So SemGrep Assistant, again, we have that 97% agreement rate here, can give you a first pass of what is a false positive and what is a true positive. And again, just to highlight a really simple example of where AI is really powerful. So this is an example where a developer has put a placeholder string here, and SemGrep is probably going to flag that as a password. But SemGrep Assistant, because it understands human language and more context, actually is going to identify correctly that this is actually a false positive, and we can ignore it because this is a placeholder and not actually a secret that's been hard-coded into our code. You can also get these kind of notifications directly in Slack, and developers can agree or disagree directly in Slack. So those are some of the core workflows that our customers are using today. And we're, again, finding a lot of improvement in terms of fix rate. We have a bunch of things we're really excited about that I want to share as well. So one of the most common things people ask us is, if I had more time, I would ask my new AppSec engineer to write more custom rules. And it's not even that writing SemGrep rules is difficult, quite the contrary. Everyone shares that it's actually pretty easy to do, but there just isn't time to do it. And custom rules are so important across the board. They are associated with fewer false positives, with higher fix rates, and higher developer satisfaction because those rules are tailored to your code base. And we're really excited to announce that we are nearly shipping a new feature that makes it really easy to write custom rules. So in 3 steps, you can write a custom rule. You give it a 1-sentence prompt, you paste an example of bad code, and you paste an example of good code. You click generate, and you now have a rule that's been drafted for you. SemGrep Assistant will understand rule syntax and write everything for you, so you don't have to worry about that. It's also great for developers if you want them to write their own rules. They don't have to learn SemGrep rule syntax. They can just use this generator automatically. One of the other neat things about this is SemGrep Assistant is able to query things like Stack Overflow, and it's able to look at things like Semgrep docs as it's doing this rule writing for you. So just the way a human might do, Semgrep Assistant can take a lot of that labor out of the cycle for you. And again, makes it much, much easier to add custom rules to your environment. Looking into the future, another thing we hear from a lot of people is they want some advice or guidance on how to promote different rules. And so this is a feature we're looking at right now, and that is basically giving guidance on which rules are, maybe very noisy and how could they be improved. We think LLMs are going to be very good at doing this. And then which of your rules are actually pretty good and should be promoted from monitor mode, for example, into comment or even block mode. We think Semgrep Assistant can provide recommendations and guidance and data for you to help make those decisions. A lot of our customers, I think, are making those decisions without full context, and we want to make that easier for you. Another thing is just ignoring files that are maybe generating a lot of noise. Again, we really, really think Semgrep Assistant can help in the reduction of false positives. And so Semgrep Assistant is going to be able to advise you and say, hey, 90% of the findings in this directory, for example, have been ignored. Assistant is going to suggest adding this to your ignore file in order to reduce noise in the future. And you can just click a button to apply that recommendation. So I just want to share some final thoughts, and we'll go into the Q&A at this point. But the way we think about Semgrep Assistant is additive and a force multiplier. So what if you could hire 2, 5, 10 more people on your team tomorrow? These are the things that you would be able to get help with, and this is what Semgrep Assistant is going to help you with. And again, the core value prop here, I think, is with that extra help, you are going to make continuous improvement in your AppSec program. You're going to have more context, better evaluation of true false positives. You're going to identify fixes and drive up that fix rate. And then most importantly over here, you're going to be able to update and add custom rules that are going to make your AppSec program better and better over time. And that is, I think, the core value of what Semgrep Assistant is helping users like Vanta and Thinkific do today.